Welcome, Lumineers and fans of the happiest card game on Earth. My name's John T. You've just been put in the inkwell with about 18 new cards to look at. Yesterday was a huge content dump from Lorcana. From all across the interwebs, they showed off a new video showing some of the happenings in Into The Inklands. And honestly, this thing is fantastic. I'll put a link down in the description for you to go and watch it. Doesn't really tell us much, but the production value of it is awesome and a huge improvement on the original couple of these that we've got now. It's really great to see that these are getting bigger and better as the game gets more established. And as part of that video, we got a huge pile of releases of cards featuring the characters in the video. There was also a huge Screen Rant article that had a load of Atlantis cards in, excuse me. And then we also had a few other bits and bobs that we haven't looked at yet since the last one of these videos. So let's dive in. We start off with a 5-costed inkable 4/6 for 1 lore in steel. Simba, Rightful King. He's a Storyborn hero king with the ability Triumphant Stance. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, chosen opposing character can't challenge during their next turn. This is an uncommon card, and it's fine, I guess. It may well see a bit of draft play. I really think they want a Ruby Steel challenging builds to happen. There's a lot of cards now in both Ruby and Steel that really care about challenging or dying in a challenge or what have you. You know, we got Shere Khan, Queen of Hearts from the last set. And this obviously goes into that. Whether it's any good, I don't know. The big problem I have with the challenge-focused decks, I'm a huge fan of Shere Khan and Queen of Hearts, by the way. I played them quite a lot. And what I found kept happening was just your opponent didn't quest, and they just dealt with your board until they could start questing, or they had lore generation through other means, things like bouncing goats and that kind of stuff, song flutes and what have you. So I really think to flesh this deck out, we need to see more stuff that can either challenge readied characters, such as the Stout Artist Cinderella, or be able to exert your opponent's characters, which at the moment I think is mostly an Amethyst with things like Pinocchio and Elsa. So yeah, not an incredible card, but I'm fascinated by the archetype that it's trying to lean into. I just don't think it's quite there yet. Another one that could go into that archetype is this 2-costed inkable 3/3 with 0 lore in Ruby. Della Duck, Unstoppable Mom, a Storyborn ally with Reckless at common rarity. This is probably one of those ones that a lot of people didn't know who she was. Della Duck is Huey, Dewey, and Louie's mum. She's Donald's twin sister, and she's been around since the 30s, and she's had various names. I think originally she was just called Donald's sister. She was called Dumbella for a while, and that got shortened to Della. But she's most prominent in the 2017 remake of the DuckTales series, which is very good, and that's where the art here is kind of leaning from. She's more of an adventurer who's been lost for a long time, which kind of explains why she hasn't been around, but then she comes back to go on adventures with her sons. It's really good, honestly. I watch all the time with my 6-year-old, and we have a blast. As far as the card goes, I don't know. I don't think you'd play this over a few other things that sit in a similar slot. I still don't really think Reckless is particularly powerful, and the uninkability probably means it doesn't see much play. A 2-costed inkable 3/2 for 1 lore, Jim Hawkins Thrill Seeker, also in Ruby, Dreamborn Hero common card. This was revealed by a German content creator, and I kind of feel a bit sorry for the guy. It's very difficult to make a reveal video about a vanilla. I instantly got excited when I first saw this, because I was like, oh, now the cool Jim Hawkins that cares about locations has got a Floodborn target, but he isn't Floodborn, he's actually Storyborn, that one. This one's Dreamborn. We can assume, I think it's fairly safe to assume that Treasure Planet and Atlantis are both having quite a big amount of cards in this set, so we can perhaps assume that Jim Hawkins does have a Floodborn on the way, this making a good target for it, but as it stands, it's a 2-costed 3/2. We have a billion of them, and there's not much else to say. A 2-cost that perhaps is more interesting to talk about is this. A 2-costed inkable 2/1 for 1 lore in Morph Space Goo, Storyborn ally alien with Mimicry. You may play any character with shift on this character as if this character had any name. It's a rare card with a really strong ability. It's a little wordy, so just to point that out, basically any Floodborn character normally needs to shift onto a character that's the same of it. You know, Giant Tink goes down onto Tiny Tactician Tink. The Flynn Rider with the lore stuff goes onto one of the little ones. That kind of thing. Here, basically, Morph can be any character you like him to be if you are Floodborning onto him, if you're shifting onto him. So, instantly, the first things you're going to think about with this card is stuff that is played at the moment, but necessarily doesn't have a good shift target. I think the big one obviously is Beast Tragic Hero. He is a Floodborn, but he's very often played at 5 because there isn't really a good shift target at 3 for him. The other one that comes to mind is Bell Hidden Archer. Again, another 5-drop with shift 3 that doesn't have a good little bell at the moment. Both of those go well onto this, and both are in colours that at least are caring about Emerald. Bell Hidden Archer is Emerald herself. Tragic Hero is steel, but gets played a lot in an emerald steel discard. So I think this card will see a lot of play. I think the real problem it has is that 1 on the butt. This basically needs to come out, sit there for a turn, and then get shifted onto next turn for you to see any real value out of it. And maybe that's enough. I do think that's pretty good, but if you're on the play, they get to have their turn 3 killing this. There are lots of steel songs that are going to get rid of this very easily. That's my only real concern here. If this thing had warned, it would be absolutely goated and would be insane and would be a $30 card probably. So I guess why they haven't done it, even if it was a 2-2, it might see a little bit more, who knows. But yeah, this is a very playable card. The only other thing I want to mention about this card, there's been a little bit of discourse around it this week. This was one of the cards that was leaked a long while ago. We haven't really talked about it much on the channel, but there was a leak of about 20 or so rare cards from the game, and a few of them have now started cropping up in reveals. Morth being one of them. Along Came Zeus that we showed off last week was one of them as well. There's a few others. I mean, actually, I don't really remember them all. I glanced over the leaks at the time and then kind of put them into the back of my mind. I do remember Morph because I remember reading the ability and thinking, oh, that's good. But there's been a bit of discourse about the fact that content creators are perhaps pretending that they've not seen these cards before. That's not true. We're just talking about them when they're officially shown. The amount of people who actually look at leaks is astronomically small, and for the most part, 95% of people are seeing these cards for the first time when they're shared on social media officially and then covered by the large swathe of content creators. So I'm not pretending that this is a surprise, this card. I'm just talking about it now for the first time, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. We don't encourage leaks. Let's let the game sort of move along at the pace that the company who owns the game wants it to. I don't think that's a shocking or incredulous statement, to be honest. All right, we move on. A 4-costed, uninkable 2/2 for 2 lore. Prince Eric, Expert Helmsman, Dreamborn Hero Prince in Ruby with Surprise Maneuver. When this character is banished, you may banish chosen character. This is a super rare card, and it's really quite interesting. This is going to be one of those ones that I have to actually get onto a table to really figure out whether it's good or not, I think. It seems relatively overcosted, but that ability can be very strong. Are you going to Teeth and Ambitions this thing to kill 2 things of their side? It's you're still 2 for 2 in, I guess, but it's going to be a big sort of tempo shift. Perhaps this guy just comes down and quests and just lets you, 2 lore isn't bad. Maybe it's just, I'm going to quest here and you worry about it, and whenever you decide to get rid of it, I get to pick something of yours. That seems pretty good. I think this is good. I think it's maybe a little overcosted. I think they're probably playing it a little safe with this. This could have been like a 2/3, or it could have been even like a 3 uninkable or a 4 inkable. I don't know. It's really difficult to judge how they decide this sort of stuff. They obviously have method to their madness. This one's interesting, but I don't know if it's good. I'll say that. These are all coming from that trailer video, by the way. This is why we're seeing these sort of relatively random mix of characters. Next up, a 5-costed inkable 3/4 for 2 lore. Tinkerbell Very Clever Fairy, Dreamborn Ally Fairy. I can use that whenever one of your items is banished. You may put that card into your inkwell face down and exert it. This is a super rare card. So this is one of the cards that comes with the gift set this time round. So I think we have seen this. We might not have seen the whole thing perhaps with all of the lore and the rarity and everything, but we've definitely seen this card before. I think it's pretty good. It obviously goes quite nicely into some item decks that are wanting to play larger things later on. The only thing I will say is it's a little bit of a nombo with the stuff that wants to recur the items from the discard. Things like Nick Wilde and Tamatoa are wanting to refuel your hand with items from the discard. This here is letting you put them in the inkwell. It is a May though, so you can sort of judge: do I need the ramp? Do I need the card to go in the discard ready for a Nick next turn or what have you? So I like a May ability. I'm a big fan of a May ability. In fact, there's a card coming coming up in a moment that should be a May ability and isn't, and it almost makes it unplayable, which we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, this is pretty good, I think. This slots quite nicely into item decks, I feel. Another one that slots quite nicely into item decks at the same cost, so they might be fighting for a spot. This is a 5-costed Inkable 2/5 for 2 lore in Sapphire. Audrey Ramirez, the engineer, storyborn ally with ward and spare parts whenever this character quests ready one of your items. So this is the official announcement of Atlantis in the game, which is very exciting, and as a card I think this is pretty good. 2/5 with ward for 2 is good stats, and it's just going to let you get some value out of items. There's an item coming up in a moment that very much wants to get readied. But yeah, otherwise I feel like this is pretty good in a deck that runs readying items. You know, obviously the big hitter items that we talk about a lot, Porpsicle, you know, that never readies, that never exerts even, it's either banished or not. But a lot of other items are seen play in that deck, either Fates, Fishbone Quill, all of those are going to let you re-ready and start getting some shenanigans with those. So I think this is pretty playable. Next up, a 3-costed Inkable item in Ruby, Sumerian Talisman. This is the source of magic. During your turn, whenever one of your characters is banished in a challenge, you may draw a card with an uncommon rarity on this one. So this is exciting stuff. This is the talisman that traps Magica Dispel from DuckTales. It looks like it's cracked here. Looks like she's got out, which is a bit of a worry. We might see a Magica Dispel card coming up, which is very exciting. And I think this is fine for an uncommon. This clearly wants to go in that Ruby deck that cares about challenging. This is sitting right alongside Shere Khan and Queen of Hearts and a few of the other steel stuff, perhaps. The only real problem I see here is that it's the same cost as Shere Khan, and you really want to get those out on curve, as you probably do with this as well. But I suppose Shere Khan on 3, this on 4, Shere Khan going into something, getting you a lore, drawing you a card if he doesn't survive. Not terrible for an uncommon. This could see play in that deck as long as it gets a little bit more support in helping you challenge. Next up, a new card. Well, all these are new cards, but this is a new type of card. This is our first legendary card that isn't a character. This is a 7-costed uninkable item in Sapphire, Lucky Dime, with the ability number 1. You can exert this and pay 2 to choose a character of yours and gain lore equal to their lore. I will go on record here and say that I don't think Scrooge McDuck likes this being called his Lucky Dime. I think he likes it to be called his first dime. But anyway, this is very good, real deep cut, and a really cool ability as well. Crazy expensive, 7 cost and inkable, but perhaps it has to be for this ability. If you're playing this in an item deck, which I think you probably are, I'm not sure this sees play outside of items, honestly. Maybe just Sapphire Ramp in general. But if you've got something like Alice, who's gained loads of support, or if you've got Belle, who's gained loads of lore from the Inkwell, or you've got Tamatoa, who's gained loads of lore from items, this basically turns them into double lore questers. You can quest with all of those. You can exert 2 and then gain that lore again on one of them. Or, which I think might also be a very playable line, is this basically lets you quest with that character without exerting it. So if you have a Tamatoa online and you can turn him sideways and gain 5 lore, but he's going to get killed by whatever they've got across from him, you can instead just activate this item and you'll gain his lore that way, keeping him ready and then safe from the majority of challenging banishment. So maybe that's a line for it as well. This lives or dies on whether or not it's plausible to play this on 7 uninkable. Maybe this becomes a 2 of when we eventually see tutors, when eventually we see cards that let you go and find something, go and find an item from your deck, put it on into your hand, that kind of thing, put it onto the top of the deck, that sort of thing. Or if we can get something that really makes items a lot cheaper, and I think it's either Maurice or Ariel. Ariel, I think, makes them cheaper. That's the only thing about this really is really excessive cost and uninkability. You draw one of these, 1 or 2 of these at the start of the game, and you're really clogging up your hand with very little to do with them. So, but I get it because it's a very strong ability, so it makes sense. This one probably slipped under the radar for a lot of people. It was revealed on the German Discord, right in between all of these other reveals from official channels and large media outlets. So this one almost passed me by. This is a 5-costed inkable action song in Sapphire, Friend Like Me. Each player puts the top 3 cards of their deck into their inkwell face down and exerted, a rare card that I almost think is unplayable. Again, this is going to get your Bell online to be able to exert her and gain a load of lore from being an inkwell. But the big problem here is that it enters exerted, meaning your opponent gets their use of their 3 that you've given them before you do. And in a multiplayer game, your 3 opponents get an extra 9 ink to play with before you do. It's the fact that they're exerted is really the thing that's hampering this card. Yeah, I don't really see this scene play. You're basically ramping everybody, but giving them the benefit of it before you are. So unless we see something that can ready your own ink, or something that sits alongside this that says if an opponent was to ink the well, let me think how this word is. There's some stuff in Magic that says if an opponent is to play the second land their turn, they don't, or something like that. So that could be done here. If an opponent was to put a card into their ink after their first one, instead it goes to discard or something like that. I could see that then working, but even still, I don't think this is playable, unfortunately, just because of how much value your opponents are going to get over yours. The only time I can really see this coming down is if it's the thing that lets you win with Bell. So if you're on 7 and you've got 2 lore, you've got 7 ink and you've got 2 bells out and you're at 10 lore, you can play this and quest with them both and win, and that's way too much of a specific line for this to see any play, I think, unfortunately. Next up, a 1-costed inkable 2/2 for 1 lore in Amber, Kida, Storyborn Hero Princess, and she has Atlantean flavor text there that says welcome to the Inklands. Excited to see Kida, obviously hoping she gets more interesting cards. This is just a Goons in Amber. This is Stitch New Dog, and at the moment you're obviously playing Stitch New Dog if you're running Rockstar. No reason to play this. Princess synergies is something to keep an eye on, but for the most part, I can only hope and assume that this is the target for a Floodborn we are yet to see. Next up, a 4-costed uninkable item in Amber, Heart of Atlantis, a Life Giver. You can exert this to pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn. A rare card that's basically a bigger lantern. So lantern is a 2-costed that lets you pay 1 less. Atlantis is a 4-costed that lets you pay 2 less, basically double across the board. Is it good enough? I'm not sure, really. On turn 4, I don't think it's worth not developing your board state just to make your turn 5 explosive. Turn 4 and 5 are really key in this game, and I'm not really sure as to whether or not this is playable. I suppose you could exert it on the turn it comes out, so you could play this and get down a 2-drop on turn 4 for free, and then leading into a pretty good turn 5, I suppose. Maybe this will see play in the decks that already see Lantern, but even Lantern I find has kind of fell off the map a little bit with Doc, so I'm not sure. 3-costed uninkable 2/4 for 1 lore in Emerald, Lyle Tiberius Rourke, Cunning Mercenary, Storyborn Villain. That was a mouthful. Well, now you know. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. And thanks for volunteering. Whenever one of your other characters is banished, each opponent loses 1 lore. This one is a super rare, and I have quite a bit to say about this one, to be honest with you. First of all, these 2 abilities obviously at face value go very well. You give something of theirs Reckless, it then has to swing into something of yours. That thing is then banished and they lose a lore. You can obviously have it going into something that doesn't mind being banished, Flynn Rider or Cheshire Cat, or maybe something else we haven't seen yet. But I still don't really love the idea of Reckless, or even giving your opponent Reckless. It's very easy for them to get around. They very often can sing something with the character and therefore not have to throw it into something. And even if they do, you are still giving up one of your characters that it gets smashed into. I suppose if you only have this on the board and something gains Reckless, all they're doing is not questing, which isn't terrible. And again, this probably fits in with a Ruby package that wants to be challenging stuff. gaining lore from when your stuff dies. And also, it's a little bit of a be prepared insurance because you are going to be able to choose the order that your stuff dies. So Lyle here can see everything else that's on your side of the board if your opponent be prepares you. Or, heck, you be prepared yourself that it'll be a lore loss for your opponent as well. It is other characters, so if he's the only thing on the board, you aren't going to gain anything from be preparing. But usually you're gonna have him and a few other things out. Next up, an Emerald Goon in Milo Thatch, 1-costed, inkable, 2/2 for 1 lore, Dreamborn Hero, clever, cartographer, common. Very little to say about these cards, honestly. This is Duke of Wesselton, but the next card kind of explains it. It is a Floodborn target for this 7-costed, uninkable 4/4 for 3 lore, Milo Thatch, King of Atlantis, with Shift 4, and take them by surprise. When this character is banished, return all opposing characters to their players' hands. This is another legendary, the 3rd legendary we've seen so far, I believe. Yep, we have Jim Hawkins, Lucky Diamond, this. And this is a very interesting ability, quite a powerful ability on paper. I do think this might be a little bit of a trap, though. The problem is it's not a May ability. I was saying earlier there is something that needs a May on it, and this is it. Problem is, when this character is banished, return all opposing characters to their players' hands. A lot of the time could be great. I'll banish this myself and return the whole of their aggro board back to their hand. But what if they're playing Goat? And that's the one lore they need to win. What if they got a couple of goats and a rabbit out? What if they're playing any number of the numerous characters that benefit from going back to your hand to be replayed? All of the stuff that has a good enter the board ability. Genie on the Job, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, Maleficent Monstrous Dragon. Heck, Maleficent Monstrous Dragon can come down, destroy Milo with her ability, and go straight back to their hand only to be replayed again next turn. So I think Milo is really good against some decks, against sort of aggro heavy decks or decks that play a lot of bodyguards, that kind of thing. But there's going to be quite a few decks and cards that this is not going to want to sit alongside or across from even. And the fact that it's uninkable and can very much get stuck in your hand if you don't want to play it is a bit of a problem. Another shift target here, but in a different colour, a 2-costed, inkable 2/2 for 1 lore, Milo Thatch, Spirited Scholar with the ability I'm Your Man. While this character is at a location, he gets +2 strength. Common card, draft chaff, I think. I really want to see a lot of characters that deal with locations, do stuff about locations, but these ones that just gain their gain some more combative stats, I don't really feel like very strong. And finally, a 3-costed, inkable 2/4 for 1 lore in Steel, Helga Sinclair, Right-Hand Woman, Storyborn Villain with Challenger 2 at common rarity, making her a 4/4 while she's smashing stuff. Maybe not terrible. 4 is pretty good, and is going to kill a lot more stuff than the challengers of Prince Eric or Captain Hook that are going to get you up to 3. Obviously, she costs a little more than the Hook. But yeah, I think if this Ruby Steel wanting to challenge deck sees play, she very well could find a spot in it, actually. Inkable with not terrible stats. In a deck that wants to challenge, she's not awful, I don't think. So there we go. I've tried to race through those quite quick. That's definitely the biggest dump we've had for set 3. Again, if you don't already know, we cover every single card that's revealed here on the channel. There's lots of other things as well. During spoiler season, we pretty much just do these because they take up most of my time, but we do have a lot of other stuff going on the channel as well. And every Monday, myself and my good friend Brandon B2 do a live stream where we look at all of this and other news in the Lorcana space as well. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Until the next one, be good.